So we understood that so far, that what means Sadao uh, went to the general for his surgery, and Sadao told him everything about the American man, and the general gave him the kind of solution that what means the general did not want that Sadao to get into the prison, and he should be given punishment of uh, hanged to till death. And that's why the general gave him the nice means a kind of a good proposal, and said that what means he would send his assassinations, who are the professional killers. What they would do now, they would uh, go to they would go to your home, and they would secretly kill that man, right? And if possible, they would also take the body of that Americans, right? And with that note, means Sadao was ready, and he came back. He was not finding himself comfortable. So, and the first night he waited for those of the assassinations or assassinators. So, and the next day, but that night, those of the so professional killers did not come. So in the second day, means he again waited for them. So what happened in the night, means he thought that means it would be the assassinators. So that's why means when he heard the loud crash, and means Hannah woke up and asked what it was. So the baby also woke up and started wailing or crying. Hannah wanted to go and check where means who Sadao stabbed her. Hannah also shouted at him and asked what the matter was, because she didn't know about the kind of plan that was made of. Sadao spoke slowly and asked her means not to go. Means Sadao was scared, and his scare affected Hannah too, right? So she stood without breathing, and waited. So there was silence, and both of them, means Sadao and who Hannah, both of them slowly went to the bed with the baby lying on the bed in between them. So up to this we have read, and next to resume with the what idea called as yet when he opened the door of the guest room. Yet when he opened the door of the guest room in the morning, there was the young man. He was very gay and had already washed and was now on his feet. Who? The American. He had asked for a razor yesterday and had shaved himself, and today there was a faint color in his cheeks. Faint color, that's something called as he was looking happy, and he was his pale yellow color that were turning the pinkish color, because he was white American, no? So that's why his white face looks like a pinkish in color, which indicated that he was means of fit and fine and recovering, right? So after that, means the American said with the joyously, "I'm well." He said joyously. So Sadao drew his kimono, right? Sadao drew his kimono around his very body. He could not. He decided suddenly go through another night. It was not that he cared for this young man's life. No, simply it was not worth the strain. So Sadao draw his kimono round his very body. Sadao wrapped his traditional Japanese gown, right? So around his, tired body. He was tired because the curiosity, the interest of, right? He decided suddenly go through another night. It was not that he cared for this young man's life. No, simply it was not worth the strain. Strain means called as the stress. He was tired because the interest of waiting, right, or kept him awake for 2 consecutive nights. He decided that he could not pass one more night in such a way. He was not bothered about the man's life, but he could not bear or tolerate the stress and anxiety any longer, right? So he did not care about the American's life, but he could not tolerate the stress and anxiety any longer. So, like when they would come, so how do they come? Means what will happen? So all such kind of a thing. You are well, Sadao agreed. So he lowered his voice. You are so well that I think if I put my boat on the shore tonight, with food and extra clothing in it. So it means Sadao wanted the man to leave. So you might be able to row to that little island not far from the coast. It is so near the coast that it has not been worth fortifying. Fortifying means called as a putting security at a place. So it has not been worth it to put the security at a place. Means it's not that there will be any security or guard. Nobody lives on it because in storm it is submerged. Submerged means called as a sinking into the sea. But this is not the season of storm. So means this is not the season of storm, means it is not going to do any such kind of a rain or called as a huge wind. You could live there until you saw a Korean fishing boat pass by. So it means he gave him the plan that how he would go or how he would escape from the place. They passed quite near the island. They pass quite. They means referring to the fishing boat people, right? They pass quite near the island because the water is many fathoms deep there. Fathom is called as a depth of the sea. The young man looked at whom? The young man looked at Sadao, slowly comprehending. Comprehending means understanding. Do I have to? He asked. Do I have to? He asked. I think so, Sadao said gently. Do I have to means what? Now, do I have to go? So, do you think that I will be able to? Sadao said gently. I think so. You understand? It is not hidden that you are here. It means everybody knew that you were here, right? The young man nodded in perfect understanding. Okay, he said simply, right? So, means he realized that, right? With the lawyer and the rage means in a slightly and briefly, he just made, especially in greetings, assent, or understanding, or to give someone a signal. That's what it's called as a nodding. So he gave the nodding. So Sadao did not see him again until evening. So as soon as it was dark, he had dragged the stout boat. So when you talk about stout, stout means called as a big, fatty boat down to the shore. Shore means called as a means to the beginning part of the sea, ocean or called as a sea. So shore, and in it he put food and bottled water that he had bought secretly during the day, as well as two kilts. Kilts means called as a two blankets type, which will cover his body and make him safe from the wind. He had bought at a pawn shop. He had bought at a pawn shop. The boat he tied to a post. The boat he tied to a post in the water. For the tide was high. For the tide was high. There was no moon, and he walked without a flashlight. And he walked without a flashlight. So if you talk about that, the pawn shop means a store that lends money. So pawn means called as a mortgaging. So that lends money in exchange for a valuable thing that can sell if the person leaving, it does not pay an agreed amount of money. So by an agreed time. So he took that everything to him. So in that case, when he came to the house, he entered as though he were just back from his work. So who? Sadao. So it means he prepared everything. So he prepared everything means Sadao left and did not meet the young man. until evening. During the daytime, he made all these arrangements for him. So as it became dark, Sadao pulled out a big boat to the shore. He placed food, bottled water in it that he had bought secretly in the daytime. He kept even 2 blankets in it. He had also purchased them for the pawn shop. Means what? Now those kilt, as there was a high tide in the sea. He tied the boat to a pole, right? Pole means that called as a what do you say that? Post. He tied the boat to a post or pole. It was a dark moonlight night, and Sada walked without a torch. So like hidden. So if you put the torch, people might see that. He did not want to be spotted by anyone. So when he came to the house, he entered as though he were just back from his work. And so Hana knew nothing. Yumi was here today. So today Yumi was there. She said as she served his supper, right? Though she was so modern, still she did not eat with him, right? Yumi cried over the baby. She went on with a sigh. She misses him so, right? So you find out that Sadao came back and he pretended that he came from home. So at the same time, Yumi was there. Yumi came to that Yumi came that day because she missed the baby a lot. That's why the servants will come back as soon as the foreigner is gone, Sadao said. So obviously, he went into the guest room that night before he went to bed himself and checked carefully the American's temperature, right? The state of the wound and his heart and pulse. The pulse was irregular, means not proper, but that was perhaps because of excitement. The young man's pale lips were pressed together and his eyes burned. Only the scars on his neck were red. So if you look into that, means Sadao went, right? Before going to bed, Sadao visited the man. He checked the body temperature of the American, the wound, that how was its condition, his heart, and he found out that it was irregular. So he thought that he might be leaving. That's why he was excited. And that could be the reason of his irregular heartbeat. So the man's lips were pressed together and his eyes were red in color, which seemed to burning with fire. The scars on his neck means were still red as they had not healed yet. So I realize you are saving my life again. So the American said to Sadao, not at all, Sadao said. It is only inconvenient to have you here any longer. Inconvenient means what? That's something called as a feeling. Uh, you feel that what? Means Sadao felt that he could not keep that man at his home for a long time. And that's why he felt sad. He had hesitated a good deal about giving the man a flashlight, but he had decided to give it to him after all. It was a small one, his one, which he used at night when he was called. So Sadao was, hesitated. So hesitated means called as a reluctance, right? In giving him a touch, as he felt that if the man used it without any knowledge, he could be spotted and land into trouble. So finally, he gave him his own touch, the one that he used when he had to attend to patients at night. So if your food runs, so he also said that if your food runs out before you catch a boat, he said, signal me 2 flashes at the same instance. Signal me 2 flashes at the same instance. The sun drops over the horizon. Do not signal in darkness, for it will be seen. If you are all right, but still there, signal me once. You will find fresh fish easy to catch, but you must eat them raw. A fire would be seen. Means everything was a kind of a advisory, right? Sadao was giving him all kind of a suggestion, plan, made up a kind of a plan, made a kind of advice, right? A number of pieces of advice. So the young man breathed and said, "Okay." So then after he was dressed now in the Japanese clothes, right? Who was means the American was dressed now in the Japanese clothes which Sadao had given him, and at the last moment Sadao covered a black cloth about his blonde head, right? So now Sadao said, so it means Sadao prepared that man. So means mentally as well as means on the basis of the appearance. So the young American, without giving a word, shook Sadao's hand warmly, right? And then walked quite well across the floor and down the step into the darkness of the garden, right? The young American, without making a word, means a handshake with Sadao's hand warmly and then, or politely, and then means walked quite well across the floor. Means it seemed like he was fine and down the step into the darkness of the garden. Once, twice, Sadao saw his light. Sadao saw his light flash to find his way, but that would not be suspected. So, like the, doctor's huge, he waited until from the shore. Means who? Sadao waited until from the shore. There was one more flash. Then he closed the partition. That night he slept. Right. So you say the man escaped, right? So what happened actually? The American man shook hands with Sadao, and as he walked away towards a boat, he used the torch twice to find the way. So, but the guards would not doubt that. Sadao waited for and make the man leave him, means till the man boarded the boat, right? Sadao closed the door and means the closed the door of the partition and slept well that night, as he had finally got rid of that American. So you say the man escaped, the general asked faintly, right? Means without uh, having a clarity. He had been operated upon a week before, an emergency operation to which Sadao had been called in the night, right? You say the man escaped, the general asked with a faintly, right? So he had been operated upon a week before, an emergency operation to which Sadao had been called in the night. For 12 hours, Sadao had not been sure the general would leave. The gallbladder was much involved. Gallbladder means it is indicating about the small, sac shaped beneath the liver. Beneath the liver means it touched to the liver. I think you know that as you are the science students. So in which bile is stored after secretion by the liver and before release into the intestine. So what do you find out here? A week ago, the general had been operated upon in an emergency in which Sadao took part for the operation. Sadao informed the man, informed the general, the man escaped. So informed the general that what? The man was escaped. The general was weak as he was recovering from the operation. For 12 hours after the operation, his condition was critical and Sadao was not sure that the general would survive or not. They had operated upon the gallbladder. Then the old man had begun to breathe. The old man means the general, had begun to breathe deeply again and to demand food. Sadao had not been able to ask about the assassins. So far as he knew, they had never come. The servants had returned and Yumi had cleaned the guest room thoroughly and had burned sulfur in it to get the white man's smell out of it. Nobody said anything. So it means sulfur had burned the sulfur. So sulfur is used to, get the smell out of it. Nobody said anything. Only the gardener was crushed because he had got behind with its You can say that chrysanthemums. So what is that chrysanthemums? That called as a flower. Only the gardener was cross because he had got behind with its chrysanthemums, right? So you would find out that a chemical element used as a disinfectant, that's called as a sulfur, was used to remove the smell. So it is stated that as the general was old man, after the operation, means he started eating food and breaths deeply or properly. Sadao did not have the courage to ask him, means what happened to the assassinations or professional killers? Why did not they come? Right, as he made the promise. Sadao knew that the killers did not turn up ever. Right. So at the same time, at Sadao's home, things returned to normal. The servants returned because the foreigner was not there. Yumi asked Sulfur to disinfect the room used by the American man, and the servants did not speak anything. The gardener was also angry because he had got late to plant the chrysanthemum flowers due to this incident, right? So, but after a week, chrysanthemum means flowers means called as it's a kind of a flowers which is you know uh, taken care by the gardener, old man. But after a week, Sadao felt the general was well enough, right, to be spoken to about the prisoner. Yes, Excellency, he escaped, right? So Sadao now said, he coughed, signifying that he had not said all he might have said, right? But was not interested to disturb the general further. But the old man opened his eyes suddenly. Yes, Excellency, he escaped, Sadao now said to the general. He coughed, signifying that or showing that he had not said all he might have said, but was not interested to disturb the general further. But the old man opened his eyes suddenly. So the prisoner, he said with some energy, did I not promise you I would kill him for you? So you did, Excellency, Sadao said. Well, 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 the old man said in a tone of amazement. So I did. But you see, I was suffering a good deal. The truth is, I thought of nothing but myself. In short, I forgot my promise to you. Right? So thou, when replied that he had promised him, the general was surprised and said that as he was suffering due to bad health, he had forgotten all about the promise that he had made. Right? So, means I wondered, Your Excellency, Sadao murmured, means in a slowly in a voice. It was surely very careless of me, the general said, but you understand it was not lack of patriotism or dereliction of duty. Dereliction means called as a derailed. So that's called as a failure to perform one's duty. He looked anxiously at his doctor. The general looked anxiously at his doctor. If the matter should come out, you would understand that, won't you? So the general was saying, right? So Sadao spoke softly and stated that the general had forgotten his promise. The general felt sorry about his carelessness, and he added that if he was neither that he did not love Japan, nor that he was shirking from his duty or going against from his duty, he looked at Sadao with curiosity as he wanted support from him. He wondered that Sadao understand his problem because he was not well. Right. Certainly, Your Excellency, Sadao said. He suddenly understood that the general was in the palm of his hand and that as a consequence, he himself was perfectly safe. I can swear to your loyalty, Excellency, he said to the old general, and to your zeal against the enemy. So the general was in palm of his hand, means he had controlled he had controlled of the general. Like, surely, Your Excellency, Sadao said, and he suddenly understood that the general was in the palm of his hand. Means he would not walk properly. So that's why he controlled him. And said that, means or realized that, means Sadao was safe, right? Means he himself was safe. And he made that comment, that promise, that means Excellency, he said to the old general that your zeal against the enemy, I can understand that, right? So, or your enthusiasm for fighting the enemy is remarkable. I understand that. So, you are a good man, the general murmured and closed his eyes. You will be rewarded. So, but Sadao, searching the spot of black in the twilight sea that night. So, you understand that this is the means a moment actually when Sadao realized that he was free now, he was means safe now. So now he's concerned for the American. So that's why that night he searched the spot of black in the twilighted sea that night, had his reward, right? And it was his reward that what? Now he should be safe. There was no prick of light in the dust. Prick of light means not a slightest amount of shining coming out from the dusk or in the evening. No one was on the island. His prisoner was gone, safe, doubtless, for he had warned him to wait only for a Korean fishing boat, right? Korean fishing boat. So he stood for a moment on the veranda. Who? Sadao stood for a moment on the veranda, looking out to the sea from where the young man had come that other night, right? And into his mind. Means he was just recollecting that day, and into his mind, although without reason, there came other white faces he had known. The professor at whose house he had met Hannah, a dull man, means, and his wife had been a silly, talkative woman, in spite of her wish to be kind, right? He remembered his old teacher of anatomy, who had been so insistent on mercy with the knife. So, and then he remembered the face of his fat and slatternly, right? So when you talk about slatternly landlady, he had great difficulty in finding a place to live in America because he was a Japanese. The Americans were full of biased prejudice, and it had been bitter to live in it, knowing himself their superiority, how he had despised the ignorant and dirty old woman who had at last consented to house him in her miserable home. He had once tried to be grateful to her because she had in his last year nursed him through influenza, but it was difficult, for she was no less repulsive to him. So, repulsive means what? Terrible, terrible to him in her kindness. Now he remembered the youthful or young age, haggard face of his prisoner, white and repulsive. Strange, he thought. I wonder why I could not kill him. Now, if you look into that, the idea called as a slatternly, Slaternly, slatternly, which means called as a dirty, untidily, unkempt, right? So even despised, called as a hated. So you would find out that Sadao stood in the veranda. So, and recollected means remembering. Remembering what? Remembering the past events. So he looked at the sea from where the man came or man had come that night. So he had also gone back. Flashbacks. Flashbacks means called as a gone back of all the Americans he had met in his life. So he thought about the dull professor. Who was the dull professor? Means the professor who taught him, at whose house he had met Hannah. So, and he also talked about his silly, talkative wife. Whose silly, talkative wife? Means who was very kind, means the professors. He remembered his teacher of anatomy who had taught them means the Japanese and Americans, like in a college, to cut open the body with a knife. Then he remembered the fat, untidy landlady, right? Fat, untidy landlady means that called as a maybe called as the owner of the land or professor's wife. So, being a Japanese, he had found an accommodation in America with a great difficulty. And he hated living there, knowing that the Japanese were superior to the Americans. So, despite knowing that what the Japanese were superior to the Americans, so uh, still he hated living there, right? And still being treated like inferiors. That's what is called as a sadness for him. Sadao liked the dirty old woman who finally agreed to let him live in her home, which was in a bad condition. The house was in a bad condition. Sadao tried to be thankful to her because she had taken care of him when he was struck. She had taken care of him. Why? Now, when he was struck, Sadao was struck by influenza during the last year of his stay in America. It was difficult for Sadao to be thankful to her as he hated her even though she was kind to him. Sadao hated her so much that her kindness also did not make him like her. So finally, Sadao remembered the weak face of the American prisoner, right? It was white in color and was terrible. Sadao felt that it was surprised for him that he could not kill his enemy despite he hated the most or hated the Americans. So all total, the enemy is a story, right, which is ended here, giving us the idea that in Japan during the Second World War, it was nothing but a kind of a story discussed in the Second World War. In this story, how an injured American army man washes up on the beach and near the home of a Japanese surgeon, Dr. Sadao Hoki. Although he has lived in America and follows a modern professor, Dr. Sadao lives a traditional Japanese life. So Dr. Sadao was in a dilemma to leave the American man to die, to throw him back into the sea, to hand him over to the army, or to save his life. He was in a dilemma or confusion. He reluctantly takes him home and decides to save that man's life. The presence of an enemy disrupts or disturbances his family life. So the presence of enemy means the American. So disturbances his family life. His wife is against his idea of operating upon and taking care of that soldier, the American. The servants of the house opposed the idea and left their master. But Dr. Sadao shelters the man, right, American, operates upon him and saves his life. Out of the fear of being accused of sheltering an enemy. So he thought that what he was keeping the enemy in his house. And because of that fear, he told the incident to the general who was in also health issue in the Japanese military. So the general committed that he would help to the Dr. Sadao, and offers to get the man killed by their professional killers. However, the killing did not take place. And after waiting for the 2 nights, actually, Dr. Sadao thinks of getting what? Getting rid of the American himself, because he did not want to. Because of him, he would live in the anxiety and kind of a fear. He arranges a boat for the man to help him reach the nearby island. He provides him all the necessary items or necessities like food, clothing to survive till he finds a Korean fishing boat which could rescue him. Dr. Sadao wonders that why did he save the life of an enemy. So this makes a kind of an interesting thing. It was his profession actually, right? It was his profession that made him to save the man, right? So it's not about that means he did not means why he saved the man's life. He was hating to the American. So even though he hated the Americans, but his profession made him to save the life of the American. Right? That's what. Okay. So have you understood, Aditi?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you have anything that you would like to ask?
Can you please repeat the meaning of slatternly?
Sorry? Which one?
Slatternly.
Okay. See, it means called
Sir, I'm
as,
writing the text.
so unkempt. It means called as unkempt. 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 Unkempt, dirty. You can also say shabby, messy, right? Untidy, right? All these words. Any other words?
No, sir. No.
So we have completed the topic. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll give you some of the set of questions. I think you have bought the sample papers, right?
Yes, sir, I have.
Okay. If you need any kind of a help, like relating to the questions, please, without any reluctance or agitation, you can ask me. Huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So will you conduct any test or something?
If you have the time, then I'll do that. It's completely on the basis of your wish. When you are,
Please do take,
yeah, go ahead.
please do take at least one or two before the exam so that so that you can check my answers and judge whether I'm writing them properly or not.
Okay, fine. So, but you tell me the date and day, I'll do the test. Right? I'll take the test of yours.
On Wednesday.